I was standing in my cozy kitchen in Portland preparing dinner for my family, feeling completely at peace with the life I had built. After 23 years of carefully reconstructing myself from the ashes of a broken childhood, I finally had everything I had dreamed of: a loving husband, 2 beautiful children, and most importantly, inner tranquility. The phone rang, displaying an unfamiliar number. I never could have imagined that this single call would crack open wounds I thought had healed forever. Before I tell you about the conversation that shook my carefully built world, drop a comment letting me know where you are tuning in from. Do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe. What happened next will make you question everything about forgiveness and family loyalty. At 41 years old, I had created the life I never thought possible during those dark childhood years. My husband David and I lived in a charming 2-bedroom house with our 8 and 10-year-old children, Emma and Jake. Every morning started the same way. I would wake at 5:30 for yoga, then prepare breakfast while David got ready for his job at the engineering firm. The kids would stumble downstairs, backpacks ready, lunches packed, and we would share those precious minutes before school started. My work as a trauma therapist was not just a career, but a calling that had emerged from my own healing journey. Helping others navigate their darkest moments gave meaning to every painful experience I had endured. The small office downtown where I practiced had become a sanctuary not just for my clients, but for the part of me that still needed to believe recovery was possible. Our home reflected the peace I had fought to achieve. David had built raised garden beds in the backyard where I grew tomatoes, herbs, and flowers. Every plant represented something I had reclaimed: the ability to nurture, to create beauty, to trust that something could grow from careful tending. The kids knew nothing about my biological family. When they asked about grandparents or aunts and uncles, I simply told them that my parents had died when I was young. David understood completely why I had made this choice and never questioned my decision to keep that chapter of my life sealed. It was a Tuesday evening in late October when everything changed. I was making tacos, Emma's favorite meal, while David helped Jake with math homework at the kitchen table. The familiar rhythm of our evening routine made me smile. This was the childhood I wished I had experienced, and now I got to provide it for my own children. When the phone rang, I almost did not answer. The number was local but unfamiliar, and we had been getting spam calls lately. Something made me pick up perhaps the therapist in me that was trained to be available for emergencies. "Hello?" I said, stirring the ground beef and expecting to hear about an extended car warranty. "Jenna. Is this Jenna Martinez now?" The voice was deeper, older, but instantly recognizable. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. I had not heard that voice in 23 years, but it was burned into my memory like a scar that never fully fades. "This is Brandon, your brother Brandon." The wooden spoon fell from my hand, clattering to the floor. David looked up, immediately recognizing the expression on my face as pure shock. I gripped the counter to steady myself, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. "I know you probably do not want to hear from me." Brandon continued, his voice carrying a nervous energy I had never heard before. "But I really need to talk to you. It took me 2 years to find your number through a private investigator, and I know this must be overwhelming, but please do not hang up." I stood frozen, unable to form words. David had already moved to my side, his hand on my back, ready to take the phone if I needed him to. Emma and Jake were fortunately absorbed in their homework and had not noticed the sudden tension filling the room. "I know this is out of nowhere," Brandon said, filling my silence. "I have been trying to find you for a long time. I have a family now, a daughter, and I cannot move forward with my life until I make things right with you." 23 years of carefully built walls started cracking. I wanted to hang up immediately to protect the peace I had worked so hard to create, but something kept me on the line. Maybe curiosity, maybe the therapist in me that wanted to understand what had prompted this contact after so many years of silence. "What do you want?" I managed to whisper. "I want to apologize. I want to make amends for what happened when we were kids. I know I was not always the best big brother, and I need you to know that I am different now. I have changed completely." The understatement was so massive it was almost laughable. Not always the best big brother. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing hysterically or screaming into the phone. "I am not asking for much," he continued. "Just one conversation. 1 hour of your time so I can explain everything and ask for your forgiveness. I am a father now, Jenna, and I want to be the kind of dad my daughter deserves. But I cannot do that with this guilt hanging over me." David was watching my face, carefully ready to intervene if needed. I took a deep breath, surprised by my own response. 1 hour, I heard myself saying. "This Saturday at 2 p.m. at the coffee shop on Burnside and 23rd. Public place, 1 hour only." "Thank you," Brandon said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "Thank you so much, Jenna. I promise you will not regret this." I hung up without saying goodbye and immediately collapsed into David's arms, shaking uncontrollably. That night, after the children were asleep, the memories came flooding back like a dam had burst. For over 2 decades, I had worked with therapists to process these experiences, but hearing Brandon's voice had unlocked every carefully compartmentalized trauma. I was 6 years old when the real abuse began, though the favoritism had existed since birth. Brandon was 9, already established as the golden child in my mother Linda's eyes. He could do no wrong while I seemed incapable of doing anything right. My earliest memory was of Brandon pushing me down the basement stairs when I was 4, then running to tell Mom that I had fallen while trying to steal cookies from the pantry. When I tried to explain what really happened, Linda scolded me for lying about my perfect brother. The physical violence escalated as we grew older. Brandon would wait until Mom was busy, then pinch me hard enough to leave bruises, knowing I would be the one in trouble if I cried. He would destroy my toys and blame me for being careless. Once when I was 7 and he was 10, he locked me in the garage for 3 hours during a thunderstorm, telling Mom I was playing hide and seek and she should not look for me. The psychological torture was even worse than the physical abuse. Brandon learned exactly which buttons to push to cause maximum emotional damage. He would read my diary when I was at school, then mock my deepest thoughts at dinner, making it sound like casual conversation, so Mom would laugh along. When I tried to make friends at school, Brandon would somehow sabotage those relationships, telling other kids embarrassing stories about me, or convincing them I was weird. Linda not only allowed this treatment, but actively encouraged it. When I would run to her with tears streaming down my face, begging her to make Brandon stop, she would accuse me of being dramatic and attention-seeking. "Brandon would never do something like that, Jenna. You need to stop making up stories about your brother." By the time I was 13 and Brandon was 16, the abuse had become a sophisticated form of psychological warfare. He had learned to hurt me in ways that left no visible marks, specializing in emotional devastation that would take years to understand and decades to heal. The incident that still haunted my nightmares happened during my freshman year of high school. I had finally made a friend, Sarah, a quiet girl in my English class, who invited me to study at her house. For the first time in my life, I felt like maybe I could be normal. Maybe I could have relationships like other kids did. Brandon found out about the friendship and decided it threatened his control over my social life. He told Sarah's parents that I had been stealing from other students and that they should be careful about letting their daughter associate with me. When Sarah confronted me about it at school, I had no idea what she was talking about. By the time I figured out what Brandon had done, the rumor had spread throughout my grade. I spent the rest of high school completely isolated, labeled as a thief and a liar. That night, I confronted Brandon in the hallway outside our bedrooms. I was crying and desperate, begging him to tell the truth about what he had done to my friendship with Sarah. His response was to grab me by the shoulders and slam me against the wall. "You do not deserve friends," he hissed in my ear. "You are nothing but a mistake that Mom keeps around out of pity. The sooner you accept that, the easier your life will be." When I ran to Linda's room, sobbing and showing her the bruises on my arms, she looked at me with disgust. You probably deserved whatever happened, Jenna. Brandon does not just hurt people for no reason. What did you do to provoke him? That was the moment I realized I was completely alone in that house. Linda was never going to protect me, and Brandon was never going to stop. I was trapped in a nightmare with no escape except to survive until I could leave. The final incident happened 3 months before I graduated high school. I had been accepted to a university 800 miles away with a full academic scholarship. My ticket to freedom was finally within reach. Brandon had been accepted to a local community college, much to Linda's disappointment, though she never criticized him the way she constantly criticized me. I was coming home from my job at the local bookstore when I found Brandon in my room reading my acceptance letter and scholarship paperwork. When I demanded he give them back, he smiled in a way that made my blood run cold. You know, Mom has been talking about how expensive college is. She thinks maybe you should stay local, help support the family instead of running away to some fancy school. I knew exactly what he was implying. Brandon was going to convince Linda that I should not be allowed to accept the scholarship, that I should stay home and contribute financially while he pursued his education. The thought of being trapped in that house for even one more year made me physically sick. "Please," I whispered, reaching for my papers. "Please do not do this. This is my only chance." Brandon held the documents above his head, laughing at my desperation. "Maybe we can work out a deal. You do my laundry for the rest of senior year, clean my room twice a week, and I will consider not mentioning to Mom how selfish you are being." When I refused, he ripped the scholarship letter in half. I lost control completely, screaming and lunging at him to save what remained of my paperwork. Brandon shoved me hard enough that I fell backward, hitting my head on the corner of my desk. Blood immediately started flowing from a gash above my left eyebrow. Linda rushed into the room, saw the blood, and immediately turned to Brandon. "What happened? Did she attack you?" "I was just trying to talk to her about college and she went crazy," Brandon said, putting on his innocent face. "She started hitting me, so I had to defend myself. I think she might need help, Mom. This is not normal behavior." Linda looked at me with pure disgust as I sat on the floor bleeding and surrounded by pieces of my destroyed scholarship letter. "You are pathetic, Jenna, attacking your own brother because you are jealous of his success. Clean yourself up and stay in your room for the rest of the night." That was my breaking point. I spent that evening secretly contacting the university, explaining what had happened to my paperwork and requesting duplicate documents be sent to my school counselor instead of my home. I also began planning my escape in earnest. 3 weeks before graduation, I packed a single suitcase and left in the middle of the night while everyone was sleeping. I left a note on my bed that simply said, "I am never coming back. Do not look for me." I changed my phone number, blocked them on all social media, and instructed the university to mark my records as confidential. For 23 years, I had successfully maintained complete no contact with both Brandon and Linda. I had built a new identity, a new life, and finally found the peace that had been stolen from me in childhood. Saturday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that normally made me feel grateful to live in the Pacific Northwest. Instead, I felt nauseated and anxious, questioning my decision to meet Brandon. David had offered to come with me or to wait in the car, but I knew this was something I needed to face alone. I arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes early, choosing a table near the front window where I could see the street and have an easy exit if needed. The familiar sounds of espresso machines and quiet conversation usually comforted me, but today everything felt too loud, too overwhelming. Brandon walked through the door at exactly 2 p.m., and I barely recognized the man he had become. At 44, he was wearing an expensive-looking navy suit, his hair professionally styled, every inch the successful businessman. He carried himself with the same confidence he had possessed as a teenager, but there was something nervous in his eyes as he scanned the cafe looking for me. When he spotted me at the corner table, he smiled in a way that made my skin crawl. The same charming expression he had used to manipulate adults when we were children. He approached slowly as if he were dealing with a skittish animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. "Jenna, you look incredible," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "I mean, you really have done well for yourself. This neighborhood, your career. I looked you up online. I am so proud of what you have accomplished." The casual invasion of my privacy disguised as a compliment made me immediately defensive. "You have 1 hour, Brandon. What do you want?" He pulled out his wallet and showed me a photo of a little girl with dark curls and bright blue eyes. "This is Sophie. She just turned 5 last month. She is the most important thing in my life, and I want to be the father she deserves." The photo was obviously meant to soften me to appeal to whatever maternal instincts I might have. Instead, I felt a chill, wondering if this innocent child would grow up in a house with the same dynamics I had experienced. "I have been going to therapy for the last 3 years," Brandon continued. "Ever since Sophie was born, really, my therapist has helped me understand that I cannot be the parent I want to be while carrying around guilt about our childhood." There it was, the real reason for this meeting. Not genuine remorse for what he had done to me, but a desire to clear his own conscience so he could feel better about himself as a father. "I know things were not perfect between us when we were kids," he said, his voice taking on that familiar manipulative tone. "I know I was not always the best big brother, and I am truly sorry for the times I hurt your feelings or was too rough with you." Hurt my feelings? Too rough. The minimization was breathtaking in its audacity. I sat there listening to him rewrite history in real time, turning years of systematic abuse into typical sibling rivalry. "I want to make amends, Jenna. I want us to have a relationship, maybe even let Sophie meet her aunt someday. But first I need to know that you forgive me for whatever pain I caused during our childhood." The word "whatever" hung in the air like poison. He was not even willing to acknowledge the specific ways he had terrorized me instead, hiding behind vague language that made it sound like normal family conflict. "Do you remember locking me in the basement for 6 hours?" I asked quietly. Brandon looked genuinely confused. "What basement? Our house did not have a basement, Jenna. The garage, then, when I was 7 and you were 10, during the thunderstorm." "I honestly do not remember that," he said, shaking his head. "Are you sure that actually happened? Sometimes kids remember things differently than they actually were." The gaslighting was immediate and automatic, just like it had been when we were children. According to Brandon, my memories were unreliable, my experiences were exaggerated, and the abuse that had shaped my entire life was either imaginary or greatly diminished. "What about destroying my scholarship letter?" I pressed. "Oh, that," he said dismissively. "I was 17, Jenna. Teenagers do stupid things. I probably thought I was being funny or something. I am sorry if that upset you, but it all worked out in the end right. You still went to college." No mention of the head injury, the blood, or Linda's complete failure to protect me. In Brandon's version of events, he was just a typical teenager pulling a harmless prank, not a young man systematically destroying his sister's future out of pure malice. "Look," he said, leaning forward with what I assumed was meant to be a sincere expression. "I am not saying I was perfect. We both probably did things we regret. But we are adults now, and I have a daughter to think about. She asked me last week why she does not have any aunts or uncles, and I did not know what to tell her." The manipulation was masterful, invoking his innocent child to pressure me into absolving him of responsibility for his actions. Sophie became a weapon in his arsenal, a way to make me feel guilty for protecting my own peace. "I have been carrying around guilt about our relationship for years," he continued. "My therapist says I need closure to be emotionally available for my family. I just need to know that you forgive me, that we can move past whatever happened and be family again." Whatever happened. As if years of abuse were some mysterious event that had befallen both of us equally, rather than a deliberate campaign of cruelty that he had orchestrated and our mother had enabled. I took a deep breath and looked him directly in the eyes. Do you remember telling me I was a mistake, that Mom only kept me around out of pity? Jesus, Jenna, I was a kid. Kids say mean things when they are angry. You probably said mean things to me too. Do you remember reading my diary and mocking me at dinner? If I did that, I am sorry. But come on, that is pretty typical brother behavior, is it not? Do you remember convincing Sarah's parents that I was stealing from other students? Who is Sarah? I have no idea what you are talking about. The complete denial was worse than I had expected. Either Brandon genuinely did not remember the systematic way he had terrorized me, or he was lying to avoid taking responsibility. In either case, this conversation was pointless. Here is what I remember, I said, my voice getting stronger. I remember living in constant fear in my own home. I remember being hurt, humiliated, and isolated because of your deliberate actions. I remember our mother choosing to believe your lies instead of protecting me. I remember being so depressed by age 14 that I wanted to die. Brandon's face went pale. Jenna, I had no idea you felt that way. If I had known— You did know, I interrupted. You knew exactly what you were doing and you enjoyed every minute of it. And now, 23 years later, you want me to pretend it never happened so you can feel better about yourself as a father. That is not fair, he said, his voice taking on an edge. I was just a kid, too. I was dealing with my own problems. Maybe if you had not been so sensitive, if you had not run to Mom about every little thing. There it was, the victim blaming that I had been expecting. According to Brandon, I had brought the abuse on myself by being too sensitive by seeking protection from our mother when he hurt me. This was a mistake, I said, starting to gather my purse. Wait, please, he said desperately. Look, maybe we remember things differently. The important thing is that we are here now trying to work things out. Can we not just agree to forgive each other and move forward for Sophie's sake? For Sophie's sake. The final manipulation using his daughter as emotional leverage to pressure me into giving him what he wanted. I stood up slowly, looking down at this man who had terrorized my childhood and was now demanding absolution to ease his own conscience. 23 years of therapy, healing, and rebuilding had led to this moment, and I finally had the words I wished I could have said as a frightened child. You do not get to decide when I am healed, Brandon. You do not get to create a timeline for my trauma recovery to convenience your own emotional needs. His mouth fell open slightly. This was clearly not the response he had been expecting. I spent 23 years building a life where I feel safe. I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. I have a husband who has never raised his voice to me. Children who will never know the fear I lived with every single day and peace that I fought like hell to achieve. Your guilt is not my responsibility to fix. But I am trying to make amends, he said weakly. I am trying to be better. No, you are trying to feel better. There is a difference. If you actually wanted to make amends, you would take full responsibility for what you did without minimizing it, gaslighting me about my own memories or demanding forgiveness in return. Brandon looked genuinely shocked that I was not falling for his manipulation tactics. I am a different person now, Jenna. I have a family, responsibilities. I go to church. Sophie deserves a father who takes accountability for his actions, not one who gets absolution from his victims, I said firmly. If you want to be better for her, do the work yourself. Go to therapy. Read books about childhood trauma. Learn about the lasting impact of abuse. Do not ask me to hand you a clean slate because it is convenient for your parenting goals. I reached into my purse and pulled out one of my business cards, placing it on the table between us. Here is the number for the best trauma therapist in the city, someone who specializes in helping abusers understand the full impact of their actions. Maybe start there. Brandon stared at the card like it was a snake. I told you I already go to therapy. Then find a better therapist, one who will not let you get away with calling systematic abuse whatever happened, or minimize years of cruelty as typical sibling behavior. I started to leave, then turned back for one final statement. And Brandon, I want you to understand something very clearly. I am not angry anymore. I am not carrying around hatred or resentment that is poisoning my life. I have worked through all of that with actual qualified professionals who helped me heal without requiring my abuser to participate. His face was getting red now, the familiar anger starting to show through his carefully constructed remorse. So you are just going to hold a grudge forever. You are going to let what happened when we were kids ruin any chance of family relationship. What I am going to do is protect the peace I worked so hard to build. What I am going to do is continue being a mother who breaks cycles instead of perpetuating them. What I am going to do is live my life surrounded by people who treat me with love and respect, which unfortunately has never included you. I walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at him one more time. Sophie is lucky to have a father who wants to be better for her, but wanting is not enough. She deserves a dad who has done the actual work of becoming better, not just one who has extracted forgiveness from his victims to feel absolved. As I walked out of the coffee shop and into the crisp afternoon air, I felt something I had not expected: pride. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to Brandon from a position of strength instead of fear. I had not been intimidated by his manipulation or guilt, tripped by his daughter's innocent face in that photograph. The drive home gave me time to process what had just happened. David was waiting on the porch when I pulled into our driveway, and I fell into his arms feeling lighter than I had in days. "How did it go?" he asked gently. "Exactly like I expected," I said. He wanted forgiveness to clear his conscience, not to actually make amends. He minimized everything, gaslighted me about my own memories, and tried to use his daughter to manipulate me into giving him what he wanted. "Are you okay?" "I am better than okay," I said, surprised by how true that was. I am proud of myself for not falling for it. I am proud of the boundaries I have built and my willingness to defend them. That evening, as we sat around the dinner table with Emma and Jake chattering about their school projects, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the family I had chosen. These children would grow up knowing they were safe, loved, and protected. They would never question whether their parents believed them or whether they deserved care and respect. Over the next few weeks, Brandon tried calling several more times, but I blocked his number after the third attempt. I also strengthened my privacy settings online and had a conversation with my children about never talking to strangers who claimed to be family members. The experience reinforced everything I had learned about healing and boundaries during my recovery journey. Forgiveness is not an obligation, especially when the person requesting it has not done the work to deserve it. Some apologies are not about remorse, but about convenience. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not to forgive, but to protect the peace you fought so hard to build. I thought about Sophie often in the weeks that followed, hoping that her father would eventually do the real work required to break the cycles that had damaged our family. But I also knew that his growth was not my responsibility, and her protection was not something I could provide from a distance. The boundary I had maintained for 23 years was not about anger or resentment. It was about wisdom. It was about understanding that some relationships are too toxic to maintain even family ones, and that choosing peace over dysfunction is not selfish, but necessary. That day reminded me that I do not owe anyone access to my life, not even family. My healing journey belongs to me alone, and no one gets to rush it or redirect it for their convenience. Sophie will have the father she deserves only when Brandon learns to father himself first, and that transformation cannot happen through extracted forgiveness, but only through genuine accountability and change. What do you think about situations where family members expect forgiveness without genuine accountability? Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between family loyalty and your own peace? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and please do not forget to like this video if my story resonated with you. Subscribe for more real stories about healing boundaries and breaking family cycles. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it is okay to choose yourself over toxic family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it helps you trust your own instincts about what relationships deserve space in your life.